Erynn Marshall here, and Carl Jones is going to join us in a minute. And I'm going to interview Erynn for iFiddle magazine. Thanks for taking the time, Erynn, to interview with me. Let me ask you about the first question I have is, were you classically trained?
Yeah, when I was a kid, growing up in Western Canada, Victoria, BC is where I was born. I've strayed a bit south since then.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, I started when I was a kid, actually wanting to learn to play the fiddle since I was 5 years old, and I finally got my hands on one when I was about 8 years old. Okay. And I had a musical family. My father played a lot of country music and different things, played in bands and whatnot. But I started off in elementary school. So yeah, I just played whatever they gave me, and in the beginning it was definitely classical, but there was a lot of folk music where I was from in Victoria. I mean, I just remember tons of swing bands, and I had a Romanian teacher for a while who played all these wonderful gypsy tunes.
Right.
And I played in a flamenco troupe for a little while. I played in a 1920s jazz band for a while. So, I guess I've played now the fiddle for 36 years, and so I had a lot of opportunity to dabble with a lot of musical styles, but I really wanted to sink my teeth into something more. Like, sometimes I feel like the West Coast is this wonderful melting pot where people pull all these styles and they pull it together in this really beautiful fusion. But I sort of wanted to just stick my teeth into one style for a while. The first folk music genre I got really mesmerized by was Irish music. And I did that exclusively for about 10 years. And I wish I could still play all that Irish music. That was 20 years ago now, almost. And I sort of, I encountered mountain music, old-time music. I became kind of mesmerized by the different fiddle tunings, the unusual bowings, the crooked tunes with unusual length phrases or bars, and those kind of notes between the diatonic scale. And these were all kind of fascinating to me.
Right.
And I the last thing I remembered before I became obsessed with old-time music, or Appalachian music as it's sometimes called, was thinking, okay, this is really interesting. The first time I
This was while you
heard
were
it.
in Canada, right?
Yeah.
You were listening to all this American folk music?
I was also going down
music?
into the States, obviously down the West
Yeah.
Coast, and I was exposed to it.
Right.
I'd see it at
Your family was musical too?
Festival of American Fiddle Tunes. I did grow up in a really musical family. So, but yeah, I remember thinking, this is really interesting stuff, but I need to stay focused. And then I completely slipped down the slope and became obsessed with, I guess, old-time fiddle for most of the last 2 decades.
Yeah, that's interesting. Who influenced you the most? Who was your biggest influence growing up?
Let's see. Well, I've had so many influences. I'm going to say, since I play old-time fiddle mostly, I'll talk about that influence. And the main influence for me there, my main mentor, was definitely Melvin Wine from West Virginia. So I left Canada and started traveling a lot in the States, particularly West Virginia. Actually, just before I started doing that, I moved from the West Coast to Ontario. I started doing an ethnomusicology degree, and I needed to focus on something. And at that time, I was kind of obsessed with old-time music, and I thought, well, I probably should focus on a Canadian music style.
Right.
But I just couldn't help how excited I was about old-time fiddling. So I just decided to do it anyways. I spent a lot of time going from Toronto down to West Virginia, central West Virginia, and I also worked on an organic farm in West Virginia, and from there was able to visit a lot of the old fiddlers. And when I used to go there, it seemed like all 80 and 90-year-old people played the fiddle. There was just so many of them. It was so inspiring. And I never imagined that was going to disappear. Like, you don't see that so much nowadays, which is a shame.
It is a shame.
But it just seemed to be an endless wealth of people that were very good, of that older generation, and they were culturally very different than me and really interesting and very generous. They really wanted me to play their music. They were very hospitable and welcoming. So Melvin Wine, out of that group, he won the National Endowment of the Arts Award Fellowship for his lifetime of playing music and inspiring so many people. I mean, he really is state treasure. Yeah. I knew him the last 5 years of his life, and so from him being 89 to 94. I mean, he died 1 or 2 months before his 94th birthday.
Did he teach you any tunes?
Yeah, I learned tons of tunes from him. Do you want me to play one?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
I'd be happy to. Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I'll try to hang on for dear life over here.
There you go.
We'll see where she goes.
Yeah, so, yeah, I love Melvin's tunes, and he had an amazing repertoire of tunes that he learned, a lot of them from his father, and his grandfather, Smithy, also played fiddle as well. And yeah, I think that was his great-grandfather. He also had a relative in the line, in the lineage there, that whistled the tunes. Wow. So some of the tunes were passed by fiddling, sometimes by whistling, back to fiddling. Melvin's dad played a lot of archaic, wonderful tunes, and his name was Bob Wine, and Melvin always said he had a real smooth style. And I thought Melvin sounded pretty smooth, but he said his dad was much smoother than he was. But one of the really old-sounding tunes that Melvin used to do, it's called Hanna at the Spring House. And of course, the spring house where people would keep their milk and different things. It was often built into the earth a little bit. Often have a little creek running through it, a little stream, and people could keep their dairy in there and keep it cold before they had refrigerators.
Nice tune. Very nice. How did you and Carl meet?
Let's see, we met at the Festival of American Fiddle Tunes. Remember I was saying that there were some great festivals in the States. And that was in 2008.
Sounds about right.
Yep, so we were both there, and just before that you were supposed to come to Canada. We won't go into all of that story.
That kind of got diverted anyway. We didn't make it to Canada.
Yeah.
He didn't make it to Canada, but when I made it down to Washington, I finally got to meet Carl, and it was great because I'd listened to his music for many, many years and always loved the music he did with fiddler James Bryan from Alabama.
Right.
He's just one of the smoothest and most wonderful fiddlers on the earth.
Yeah,
and,
fiddler for sure.
Yeah, so I met Carl there. I also met him at several other fiddle camps after that, and we kept in touch, and we talked for a good year. And then I ended up getting a position in Galax, Virginia, organizing all the music at the Blue Ridge Music Center. So I did that for 5 years. But anyways, that put me close to Carl.
Yeah.
So
Before that too, I did a
and now we're married
recording.
too.
Yeah.
That was Parsi. He had a recording, and I did a song on that and played a little bit on it.
That's right. 2
Tune
weeks.
Tramp, I guess. Was
Right after I met
Yeah.
Carl, I was putting out this compilation album with friends all over the country, all over the U.S. and Canada. There was 45 guest musicians on the album, and I had so much fun playing with Carl. I asked him to play music with me on that album, and so he ended up writing the title track, and I think he really captured the great distances we traveled to play the music we love with the people we love to play music with.
Wow, that's great. That's a great story.
So,
Yeah. Tell me about your fiddle playing. How do you produce such a good tone that you have? How do you do that?
well, I have had people ask me me that before, and a lot of people are surprised when they try my fiddle because they think I have a loud fiddle, but I don't actually. This is a wonderful fiddle made by John Smith, who is a Scottish maker who emigrated to Canada in the early 1900s. He made this near the end of his life in 1936. But it's not a really loud fiddle, but it's a sweet fiddle. I do attribute some of the tone to this instrument. I've had it so long, and we've been through a lot together. But I think the secret to tone is having good hair contact with the string and not letting it get airy. You know, coming out of the string a lot creates a lot of air. Right. And so I really try to sink in, and I had a good teacher over 20 years ago tell me that I would hurt myself if I kept playing the way I was, which was I was holding all my upper body upwards and then pressing down to make sound. And she taught me to use the natural arm weight of my arm and let it just sink into the fiddle, and by relaxing I could create a bigger sound. Right. And I think that's one of the best lessons I ever learned, because I learned how to relax, and by relaxing I could create a big tone. And so obviously not working and having a better result, you know, working less, better results, was very appealing. Yeah. So so I always try to share that with people in my workshops, so that they can get a big sound and have to work less for it.
What about your bow? What kind of bow do you use? And what about rehairing your bow? How often do you do that too?
You know, I had an expensive bow once, and I got rid of it because I have champagne taste, and I want to I've seen some really nice $3,000 or $4,000 bows I couldn't afford that I couldn't get. I had one that was about $1,000 bow. And, was it? I'm trying to remember now. It's been a while. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. I got rid of this nice old German bow that I had, and I just have a $75 carbon fiber bow right now. So nothing fancy. It's just a fusion bow. I do think good quality hair really matters. So I always get a really high grade hair because it has less variation in the thickness of the hairs. You know, they sort the hair, and for an extra, $10, usually you can get the upper grade of hair, and I think that really helps. It creates a smoother sound, and I usually rehair it at least every 6 months. Yeah. But obviously, if somebody wasn't playing as much as me, they might not feel the need to do it that often.
That much, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you learn a tune?
I learn tunes by ear because I think it's an oral tradition, and the nuances of the accent just don't come through unless you're learning a tune by ear. So even though I can read music fluently, I can write music fluently, I just don't think that's the medium for learning the style. It's like learning Spanish from a book and trying to have a good accent. You won't, every different fiddle style is like a different dialect or a different accent. Right. And so in order to learn it well, you have to listen to it a lot. I think whatever you want to sound like, if you listen to it a lot, listen to the native language you're trying to learn, you will get it. And just, learn it by ear, because certain things like bow speed or bow pressure, there's no way to write them down on paper.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Everywhere.
That's a good answer.
Oh, I don't know. We're kind of like musical gypsies, aren't we, Carl? So
cover a lot of territory.
Yeah,
more ever covered before since I've known her.
We were just reminiscing, since we're here in Austin, Texas today. The last time we were in Austin, Texas, we drove how many miles?
Last December we were gone all month, and we went about 8,000 miles and 21 states.
Yeah, we drove through 21 states in the month of December, and Canada, parts of Canada. So that was a pretty big trip. But we love to travel. We love to be home as well. But we travel a bunch, and so I expect that we'll be traveling to some places that we haven't been to already. We go to Europe regularly.
Do you teach?
I love to teach. Yeah, this summer I taught at 10 fiddle camps.
Wow.
So that was a new record for me, and I'm very passionate about teaching, and you know, I didn't have it really easy when I was learning the fiddle. I think that I made a lot of the usual mistakes. I wasn't the virtuoso child that just could do it.
Yeah.
And I had to relearn a lot of things, and I had experimented a lot, and I'm still trying to learn the instrument. And I always will be making an effort to try and learn it. But because I've had to learn and relearn so many times, I think that's helped me as a teacher, because there's different things along the way that have really helped me, and I share any, you know, tips or teaching methodologies that have helped me, and everybody's different, so it's just trying to figure out what really is going to help somebody. And I really genuinely want to help the people in my fiddle classes. I mean, it's a wonderful instrument. It welcomes you into this musical community. It makes people's lives better. I think it brings a lot of good to the world.
Yeah.
So if I can help somebody on their path to enjoying music, then I'm happy to. The old fiddlers certainly were very generous to me.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, that's about all the questions I have. Can you play us another two?
Sure. What should we do? Sure.
I can mess her up in any key on any tune.
How about Little Ginny Sutton? It's a good local tune from our area, where we live right now. Galax, down through Mount Airy in North Carolina, Galax, Virginia. They love this tune.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that.
And people are starting to come.